I left my daughter with Down syndrome in the hospital. 25 years later, she saved my life. I was a young father in 1994 California, scared and unprepared when my daughter was born with Down syndrome. Instead of facing my fears, I made a choice that would haunt me for the next quarter century. I left her in the hospital and never looked back, convinced that everyone would be better off without me. But what I didn't know was that my daughter didn't just survive without me, she thrived. And when I finally found her 25 years later, the person she had become would force me to confront the worst version of myself and ask a question I never thought I'd have the courage to ask. Can she ever forgive me? Before I can explain how all this happened, it's very important that you like and subscribe to the channel. That will help us a lot. Only then can we continue. Our future is in your hands. Now let's get back to this incredible story. My name is Robert Martinez, and I'm 72 years old now. For most of my life, I was a man running from himself. I spent decades in California, moving between cities, changing jobs, changing names on documents, doing everything I could to forget a single moment in time that changed everything. That moment was October 15th, 1994, in a hospital in San Francisco. I was only 27 years old then, working construction, living paycheck to paycheck in a small apartment in the Mission District. I had just found out that my girlfriend Carmen was pregnant, and honestly, I was terrified. We weren't ready. I wasn't ready. I was still figuring out my own life, still angry at my own father for leaving when I was a kid, still carrying wounds I didn't know how to heal. When Carmen went into labor, I sat in that waiting room for hours, my leg bouncing, my palms sweating. I was going to be a father. The thought made me sick with anxiety. I kept telling myself it would be okay, that once I saw the baby, something would click inside me and I'd know what to do. But when the doctor came out with that look on his face, that sympathetic expression I've seen 1,000 times in my nightmares since then, everything changed. Down syndrome. Those two words felt like a death sentence to my 19-year-old self's dreams. The doctor explained it all, the heart condition, the learning challenges, the therapies she would need, the financial burden, the emotional toll. He said it with kindness, but all I heard was impossibility. I went to see Carmen and the baby girl we had named Sophia. She was perfect in every way, with this tiny face and these beautiful dark eyes that looked right at me. And I felt nothing but panic. I remember Carmen crying, not from sadness, but from this overwhelming love she already felt. She was already in, already committed, already a mother in that perfect, unbroken way. But me, I was broken. I was already a failure in my mind, and so I made a choice that I would spend the next 25 years trying to undo, but knowing I never fully could. I told Carmen I needed to get some air. I never came back. I didn't abandon Sophia in some dramatic, cold way. I left gradually, missing visits, missing calls, making excuses, until eventually the visits stopped being expected. Carmen tried to fight me legally at first, but I was good at disappearing. I changed my number, took jobs out of state, and when that didn't feel far enough, I came back to California, but to a different part of it, as far from San Francisco as I could get. I told myself I was being noble, that Sophia would be better off without a father who didn't want to be there, that Carmen would eventually find someone better. But that was just a lie I told myself so I could sleep at night. What I didn't know was that Carmen never remarried. She raised Sophia alone, worked 2 jobs, and gave her everything. And Sophia, despite everything against her, despite having a father who didn't believe she could have a full life, grew into something extraordinary. It took me 25 years to find that out, and when I finally did, it was already too late to change the past. The years after 1994 were a blur of running and hiding. I moved to Los Angeles first, found work with a construction company in downtown, and threw myself into labor that exhausted my body but never quite silenced my mind. At night, in those small apartments I rented month to month, I would lie awake thinking about Sophia. I would wonder if she was okay, if Carmen was managing, if my absence was making things worse or better. I told myself it had to be better. How could a man like me, a man who was afraid of his own shadow, be any good to a daughter who needed so much more than I could give? The guilt came in waves. Sometimes it would hit me in the morning when I woke up, this crushing weight in my chest that made it hard to breathe. Other times it would creep up on me in the middle of a workday, and I would have to excuse myself, find a bathroom stall, and sit there in the dark until the feeling passed. I started drinking more than I should have. Nothing serious. Nothing that would make me lose my job, but enough to take the edge off the pain. I would go to bars after work, order a beer, and sit in the corner watching other men my age talking about their kids, showing pictures, complaining about soccer games and school fees, and I would feel this searing anger mixed with envy. By 1997, 3 years after Sophia was born, I had convinced myself that she was probably better off. Carmen had always been strong, always been the kind of person who could handle anything. Maybe she had met someone new by then, someone better than me, someone who could be the father Sophia needed. Maybe they had moved on and forgotten about me entirely. The thought should have brought relief, but instead it made me feel even emptier. I was erasing myself from their lives, and the more successful I was at it, the more hollow it made me feel. I changed jobs frequently, never staying in one place long enough to make real friends or connections. In 1999 I moved to San Diego, and for a moment I thought maybe the distance would help. San Diego was far enough south that I could almost convince myself I was in a different world, a different life. I got a better job, made more money, moved into a nicer apartment. I started dating a woman named Michelle, and we were together for almost 2 years. She was kind, uncomplicated, and she never asked too many questions about my past. But every time she talked about wanting to have kids, something inside me would shut down. I couldn't do it. I couldn't become a father to another child when I had failed so monumentally at fatherhood already. The guilt never really left me, though. It just became part of the fabric of my daily life, something I carried around like a second skin. I would see children with Down syndrome sometimes at grocery stores or parks, and I would have to leave. I couldn't bear to look at them, couldn't bear to imagine what Sophia might look like, how she might move, what kind of personality she might have developed. So I trained myself not to see them, to look away, to protect myself from the one thing that could break through my carefully constructed walls. In 2000, I ended things with Michelle. She sensed something was wrong, that I was holding part of myself back, and she deserved better than that. After she left, I found myself thinking more and more about Sophia. She would be 6 years old now, starting school probably, learning to read, making friends. I wondered if she was happy. I wondered if she ever asked about me. I wondered if Carmen told her the truth about why I had left, or if she made up some kind story to protect her from the pain of knowing that her own father didn't want her. The 2000s came, and I entered a kind of middle age without ever really feeling like I had lived. I worked, I paid my taxes, I was a decent person in most ways that mattered to the outside world, but inside, I was hollow. I had built my entire life around the absence of Sophia, around the space where she should have been. Every choice I made, every woman I didn't fully commit to, every promotion I didn't take because it would have required stability and roots. It was all connected to that one moment in the hospital when I looked at her perfect face and saw only my own inadequacy. By 2005, I was in my early 40s, and I felt ancient. I had aged badly, worn down by the weight of secrets and shame. I would catch my reflection in windows sometimes and barely recognize myself. There was a hardness in my face that hadn't been there before, a kind of permanent sadness around my eyes. I'd become the kind of man who sat alone at bars, the kind of man who nobody really knew, the kind of man who had given up on the possibility of real connection or real family. That year, I made a decision that I thought would be my final step in erasing myself from Carmen and Sophia's lives. I would hire a lawyer and sign away all parental rights. It seemed like the most honest thing I could do. If Carmen had somehow managed to give Sophia a normal life, a stable life, then the last thing she needed was a father showing up demanding to be part of it. Sophia would be growing into her own person by then, probably in middle school, forming friendships and discovering who she was. The last thing she needed was the shock of learning that her father, the one who had abandoned her, suddenly wanted back in. It would only be cruel. I contacted the lawyer, filled out the paperwork, and within a few months it was official. I was no longer Sophia's father in any legal sense. The papers said so. It was clean, it was final, it was the right thing to do. Or at least, that's what I told myself. In reality, it was just another way of running, another way of protecting myself from the possibility of being hurt, or of hurting her further. The years that followed were the loneliest of my life. I moved back to Northern California, back closer to San Francisco, though I never went into the city itself. I found work in construction again, which was all I had ever really known how to do well. I was good with my hands, good at building things, good at taking instructions and showing up on time. My boss liked me, and I got steadier work. By my early 50s, I had some savings, a small house in a quiet neighborhood in the suburbs, and a life that looked from the outside like it might be peaceful. But I had no family. I had no one who loved me. And every night I would lie in that house that I owned but didn't belong in, and I would think about Sophia. She was a teenager by then, probably struggling with the same things all teenagers struggle with, but with the added complexity of having Down syndrome, of navigating a world that didn't always understand her or accept her. I wondered if she had friends. I wondered if she was happy. I wondered if she knew anything about me, or if Carmen had completely erased me from the story of her life. And then, in 2009, something happened that would begin to crack open the door that I had sealed shut so carefully. My mother called me out of the blue. I hadn't spoken to her in years. She was old now, in her 80s, living in a care facility in Sacramento. She was dying, she said, and before she went, there was something she needed to tell me. Something about Sophia. Something that Carmen had made her promise never to share with me, but something she couldn't take to her grave. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. If you're experiencing guilt about your own family situation, leave a comment below. Your stories matter too, and I want to hear from you. I drove to Sacramento in the rain. It was November, cold and grey, and the whole drive felt like I was moving through a dream that I couldn't wake up from. My mother's voice on the phone had been weak, fragile, nothing like the strong woman I remembered from my childhood. She sounded like she was already halfway gone, already slipping away into whatever comes next. I kept the radio off the entire drive. 4 hours of silence, and just the sound of my own thoughts, which were loud and chaotic and full of dread. The care facility was nicer than I expected, all bright colors and soft lighting, designed to make dying look less depressing. A nurse led me to my mother's room, and when I saw her in that bed, so small, so diminished by time and illness, I almost couldn't handle it. This was the woman who had raised me alone after my father left, the woman who had worked herself to exhaustion to keep a roof over our heads, and I had repaid her by disappearing from her life just like my father had disappeared from mine. The irony wasn't lost on me. She reached out her hand when I came in, and I took it. Her skin felt like paper, thin and fragile, and I was afraid I might hurt her just by holding on. We didn't talk about small things the way people usually do. There was no time for that, and we both knew it. She looked at me for a long moment, and then she said, "Carmen found me about 5 years after you left. She tracked me down through my sister and she came to see me. She was carrying Sophia, who was just a little girl then, maybe 4 or 5 years old. And she told me everything." I felt my chest tighten. I didn't want to hear this. I had spent 15 years not wanting to hear this, and now my dying mother was going to force me to listen. But I couldn't leave. I couldn't walk out on her the way I had walked out on everyone else. So I sat there holding her hand and I listened. Carmen had come to my mother's house in Sacramento with Sophia in tow. My mother said that the moment she saw Sophia, she knew. She knew immediately that this was her granddaughter, that she could see parts of me in her face, in the way she moved, in the shape of her eyes. Carmen was nervous, my mother said, like she wasn't sure she was doing the right thing by coming. But she felt like my mother had a right to know her granddaughter, even if her son didn't want to. Even if her son had made it very clear that he didn't want anything to do with them. They had sat in the kitchen, my mother said, and Carmen had told her about the first 5 years of Sophia's life. She told her about the medical appointments, the early intervention programs, the therapies. She told her about the sleepless nights, the worries about the future, the discrimination she had already faced from people who didn't think a child with Down syndrome was worth the effort. But she also told her about Sophia's personality, about how much she loved music, about how she made everyone around her smile, about how she had this incredible capacity for love and joy that put most normal people to shame. And then Carmen had asked if my mother would be part of Sophia's life, if she would be her grandmother in a way that I never could be. My mother had said yes immediately. She had been so hungry for family, for connection, for a reason to feel like she mattered. Sophia had filled that void. For the next 15 years, until my mother's health had declined too much for her to manage the trips to San Francisco, Sophia had visited every other month or so. They had built a relationship, a real one, full of love and laughter and memories. My mother squeezed my hand as hard as she could manage, which wasn't very hard at all. She said, "Robert, I need you to understand something. That little girl, your daughter, she is the best thing that ever happened to this family. She is brave and kind and intelligent, and yes, she has Down syndrome, but that doesn't define her. And the tragedy isn't that she was born with Down syndrome. The tragedy is that you were too afraid to know her. You wasted all those years, and she didn't waste a single day. She lived, Robert. She really lived. I couldn't speak. I couldn't breathe properly. All I could do was cry, and I did, openly and without shame, like a child. My mother didn't try to comfort me. She just held my hand and let me fall apart. When I could finally speak again, I asked her about Sophia now, about what she was like as a teenager, about what she wanted for her life. And my mother told me, as much as she could before the medication pulled her back under, about a beautiful young woman who loved reading and animals and had dreams of working with children. She told me about a girl who had asked about me, about her father, and what my mother had told her. I asked what she had said. My mother's eyes were closing now, the exhaustion too much even for her will to stay awake. She said, "I told her the truth eventually. I told her that you were afraid, that your fear had nothing to do with her, that sometimes grown men are broken and can't fix themselves. And she forgave you, Robert, even though she had never met you, even though you had never given her any reason to, she forgave you." Those were almost the last words my mother said to me. She died 3 days later, and I was with her when it happened. She simply stopped breathing, like she had finally finished saying what she needed to say and could let go. After the funeral, after the will was read and the estate settled, I was left with a piece of paper. It was an address in San Francisco, written in my mother's handwriting. It was Carmen's address, the place where Sophia lived, and there was a note attached saying, "It's never too late to do the right thing." For months after that, I didn't know what to do with that address. I carried it around in my wallet, took it out and looked at it sometimes, then put it away again. The fear was just as strong as it had ever been, maybe stronger now. Because now I knew that Sophia was real, that she had thoughts and feelings and a life that had nothing to do with me. Now I had to face the possibility that she might not want to know me, that she might hate me, that everything I had told myself about protecting her by staying away had been a lie. By 2010, a year after my mother died, I was 53 years old. I had spent the last 25 years of my life running from a moment that I could never change. I had built walls so high around myself that I barely remembered what it felt like to be close to another human being. I had become a ghost, a man who existed but didn't really live. And I was tired. Tired in a way that sleep couldn't fix. Tired in a way that only comes from carrying around a burden so heavy that you forget what it feels like to be free. One day in March, I took that address out of my wallet and I drove to San Francisco. I didn't have a plan. I didn't know what I was going to do or say. I just got in my car and drove, following the same roads I had followed so many years before, trying to run away. This time, I was trying to run toward something. This time, I was trying to run toward the truth. I found the house, a small Victorian in the Mission District, not far from where Carmen and I had lived when Sophia was born. I sat in my car across the street for 2 hours, watching the windows, watching for movement, watching for some sign that this was really happening. And then the door opened. A young woman came out, maybe 25 or 26 years old, with dark hair and a round face that was so familiar it knocked the breath out of me. She was pushing a stroller, and she was singing to the baby inside it, this soft little song that made my chest ache with a longing I couldn't name. She walked down the street and turned a corner, and I sat there gripping the steering wheel, knowing that I had just seen my daughter for the first time in 25 years. And I had no idea what to do about it. I need to know what you're thinking right now. Comment below and tell me, if you were in Sophia's position, would you want to know the truth about your father, or would you rather he stayed gone? Your perspective is important to this story. I spent the next 3 weeks in San Francisco, living in a cheap hotel near the Mission District, watching my daughter's life from a distance. I became a stalker without the malice, a ghost haunting the edges of her world, trying to understand who she was without actually knowing her. I would follow her to the park where she took the baby, to the coffee shop where she worked part-time, to the library where she spent hours reading. I watched her interact with people, saw how they treated her, noticed the way some people's eyes would slide over her with that mixture of pity and discomfort that I had felt so many years before. But what I noticed most was that nobody else seemed to see what I was seeing. They didn't see the person with Down syndrome first. They saw Sophia. They saw a young woman who was competent and kind and fully present in her own life. The barista at the coffee shop knew her order by heart. The other mothers at the park included her in conversations without any hint of condescension. Her boss clearly trusted her with responsibilities. She was woven into the fabric of her community in a way that made me realize, with crushing clarity, that she had never needed me. Not once. On the 21st day, I finally worked up the courage to approach her. She was at the library, sitting in a corner chair with a book about animals, and there was a little boy, maybe 3 years old, sitting next to her. He wasn't her son. I learned later that she volunteered at the library, reading to children. She was doing something I never would have imagined she could do, something that required patience and communication and a genuine love for helping others. She was changing lives, this daughter of mine, in ways that were so simple and so profound that it made me ashamed of every doubt I had ever harbored. I sat down across from her, and my hands were shaking so badly that I had to grip the arms of the chair to keep them still. She looked up from her book, and for a moment, just a moment, I saw confusion in her eyes, then recognition, or something like it. She said, "Do I know you?" And I couldn't speak. I just sat there looking at her face, which was my face and Carmen's face, and something entirely her own, all at the same time. The little boy asked her who I was, and she said, "I don't know yet." Then she looked at me again and she said, "My grandmother talked about you. You're Robert, aren't you? You're my father." The way she said it, it wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact, delivered without anger or accusation, just the simple truth that she had apparently known for some time. I asked her how long she had known, and she said since I was 7. My mom told me. She said you were scared, and sometimes scared people do bad things, but that didn't mean I had to be scared too. I don't know how long I sat there crying. The little boy got uncomfortable and went back to his mother, and Sophia just watched me with this expression of such profound sadness and compassion that it made me feel like the worst kind of coward. I finally managed to say, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for everything. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't deserve forgiveness. But I needed you to know that it was never about you. It was always about me and my own brokenness." Sophia closed her book. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Do you want to get coffee with me? I have a break in 20 minutes. And just like that, without any fanfare or dramatic confrontation, we made plans to have coffee together. We walked to the cafe where she worked, and her co-worker, a kind-looking woman named Maria, seemed unsurprised to see me. I realized later that Sophia must have talked about the possibility of me showing up, must have prepared herself for this moment in a way that I never could have. We sat at a small table in the corner, and Sophia ordered tea while I ordered black coffee that I didn't really want. For the first time in 25 years, I was sitting across from my daughter, and I had no idea what to say. She solved the problem by asking me questions. She asked me about my life, about where I had been, about what I had done all these years. And I told her. Not the cleaned-up version, not the version where I was a good man making hard choices, but the real version. The version where I was a coward who had run away because he was afraid. The version where I had wasted decades of my life because I couldn't face my own shame. Sophia listened to all of it without interrupting. When I was done, she said, "You know, my mom used to cry about you. Not because she was angry, but because she felt like something was missing. Not just for her, but for you too. She said that you were probably somewhere being sad about something that you didn't have to be sad about. She said that sometimes people create their own prisons." I asked her if she hated me. She said, "I don't know you well enough to hate you, but I also don't think hate is very useful. I spent a lot of time being angry when I was younger, angry that you didn't want me, angry that I had Down syndrome, angry at a lot of things. But then I realized that my anger was just hurting me. It wasn't hurting you at all. So I let it go. I could be angry again if you want me to be, but I don't think that's what either of us needs right now." I asked her what she did need. She thought about it for a moment, and then she said, "I think I need to know that you see me. Not as a charity case or a burden or some inspiration story, but as me, as Sophia, as someone who has Down syndrome, but who is also so much more than that. Can you do that?" I said yes, and I meant it with every fiber of my being. We talked for 3 hours that day, until her break was over and she had to go back to work. She told me about her life, about the books she loved, about the little girl she was babysitting for, about the dreams she had for her future. She told me about her mother, Carmen, who had raised her alone with so much love and sacrifice that it broke my heart all over again. She told me about my mother, her grandmother, and the special relationship they had shared. She told me about the other children in the neighborhood who called her their friend, about the teachers who had believed in her, about the community that had embraced her in a way that I never could have. And when she left to go back to work, she did something I didn't expect. She hugged me. It wasn't a long hug, and it wasn't the kind of hug that erased everything that had happened between us, but it was a beginning. She said, "I'm working tomorrow too, same time. You can come back if you want. I want to introduce you to my mom. I think it's time." That night I sat in my hotel room and I couldn't sleep. I was terrified about seeing Carmen again, terrified about her reaction, terrified that she would throw me out and tell me never to come back. But I also knew that I couldn't run anymore. I had run far enough, and all it had done was create more distance between myself and the people I loved. Sophia had shown me something that day that I had lost a long time ago. She had shown me forgiveness. Not the kind of forgiveness that excuses everything, but the kind that says, "Yes, you hurt me. And also, I'm not going to let that hurt define my life." The next day, Sophia brought me to meet Carmen. We went to a small park near their apartment, and Carmen was waiting on a bench with her hands folded in her lap. She was older now, of course, her hair streaked with grey, her face lined with the kind of wear that comes from years of hard work and hard choices. But she was still the most beautiful woman I had ever seen, because she was the woman who had loved our daughter when I couldn't, who had raised her with grace and strength and unwavering commitment. When she saw me, she stood up. For a moment, I thought she might slap me and I would have deserved it. Instead, she just looked at me for a long time, and then she said, "Hello, Robert. It's been a long time." Sophia took her mother's hand, and I could see Carmen squeeze it, drawing strength from our daughter. Sophia said, "Mom, I know what Dad did was wrong, but I've decided that I want to know him, if he wants to know me. Is that okay?" Carmen looked at Sophia, and I could see the calculation happening behind her eyes. She was weighing her own pain against her daughter's wishes, and in that moment I understood the depth of the sacrifice she had made all these years. She said, "Yes, Sophia. That's okay, but we're going to take it slow. And if at any point I feel like you're being hurt again, we're done. Do you understand, Robert?" I said I understood, and I did. We spent the next several hours together, the three of us, talking in that park. Sophia played with the other children while Carmen and I talked for the first time since before Sophia was born. She told me about the struggles, about the money she didn't have, about the school fights she had to fight, about the people who told her that she was wasting her life on a child who would never be normal. She told me about the joy, too, about the first time Sophia said "Mama," about the day she learned to read, about watching her grow into a beautiful young woman who had more kindness in her little finger than most people had in their entire bodies. And then Carmen said something that changed everything. She said, "I forgave you a long time ago, Robert, not because what you did was forgivable, but because holding on to my anger was like drinking poison and expecting you to get sick. Sophia needed me to be present, and I couldn't be present if I was drowning in resentment, so I let it go. But that doesn't mean you get a free pass. It means that if you want a relationship with my daughter, with our daughter, you're going to have to earn it. Every single day. Can you do that?" I said yes, and this time I didn't just say it, I meant it, all the way down to my bones. What do you think about Carmen's response? Was she too forgiving, or did she handle this the right way? Drop your opinion in the comments. I'm reading every single one, and your thoughts matter. The next 5 years were the hardest and the best years of my life. I moved back to San Francisco permanently, rented an apartment just a few blocks from Carmen and Sophia, and I began the slow, painful process of becoming a father. Not the father that Sophia had needed when she was born, because that time was gone and I could never get it back, but a father that she could have now, in this moment, in this present, that was the only moment I actually had any control over. I started going to Sophia's work at the coffee shop, and instead of just watching from afar, I became part of her life. I learned her routines, her preferences, her favorite authors and artists. I volunteered at the library with her, helping her read to the children. I met her friends, attended her reading club meetings, celebrated her birthday with cake and terrible singing. And slowly, day by day, I stopped being a stranger who had abandoned her and became someone she could trust. Carmen was cautious, and rightfully so. In those early days, she would sit nearby whenever Sophia and I spent time together, ready to intervene if anything went wrong. But gradually, as months turned into years and I showed up consistently, she began to relax. She saw that I wasn't there to make excuses or ask for gratitude. I was there because it was the right thing to do, because my daughter deserved to have a father, and because I finally understood that being a father meant showing up day after day, even when it was hard. One day, about 2 years into this new chapter, Sophia asked me why I had come back. She said, "You could have stayed away. Mom and I were doing fine without you. You didn't have to come back and make yourself sad by thinking about what you missed." I sat with that question for a long time before I answered. I said, "You know, for 25 years, I told myself that I left because I was protecting you, but that was a lie I told myself so I could sleep at night. The truth is, I was afraid. I was afraid that if I stayed, if I tried to be your father, that I would fail you. And that fear was so big, so overwhelming, that I convinced myself that leaving was the brave thing to do." Sophia listened, and then she said, "That's a lot of fear to carry around for that long." I said, "It was. And you know what the worst part was? All that fear, all that running, all that time I spent trying to protect myself from pain, it didn't work. I was miserable. I was alone. I was a ghost. And you were happy. You were loved. You were becoming this incredible person. So my fear didn't protect anyone, it only hurt me, and I realized I had wasted my whole life being afraid of something that turned out to be okay." Sophia reached over and squeezed my hand. She said, "I'm glad you came back, Dad. I want to call you Dad now, if that's okay. Is that okay?" I cried so hard I had to excuse myself to the bathroom. When I came back, I said, "Yes, baby, that's more than okay. That's everything." But my redemption was far from complete. There was still Carmen, and the debt I owed her was immeasurable. She had given up her 20s and 30s to be a single mother. She had fought battles that I never had to fight, made sacrifices that I never had to make, and done it all with grace and strength and a kind of love that I was only beginning to understand. One day, I asked her if she would have dinner with me, just the two of us. I wanted to talk to her, really talk to her, without Sophia as a buffer. We went to a small restaurant in the Mission District, the neighborhood where we had first met, where we had been young and in love and full of possibilities. Carmen ordered wine, and I could see her hands were shaking slightly. I said, "I know I can't undo the past. I know I can't give you back the years that I wasn't here, but I want you to know that I understand now, in a way that I didn't understand before, what you did. You took our daughter, and you loved her when I couldn't. You fought for her when nobody believed in her. You gave her a life that was full and rich and beautiful, even though you were doing it alone. And I will spend the rest of my life being grateful for that, and being sorry for the burden you had to carry." Carmen cried, and I cried, and we sat there in that restaurant, two middle-aged people who had once been young and foolish and full of hope. She said, "I was so angry with you for so long. I felt like you had stolen something from me, like you had taken away the family I was supposed to have. And then one day I realized that my anger was only hurting me and Sophia. It wasn't hurting you at all. You were somewhere else, living your own life, and I was here, poisoning myself with rage, so I had to let it go, not because what you did was right, but because I needed to be able to move forward. I asked her if she could ever forgive me. She said, 'I already have, Robert. That's not what this is about anymore. This is about whether you can forgive yourself. Can you?' That question haunted me for weeks. Could I forgive myself for abandoning my daughter? Could I forgive myself for wasting 25 years running from a fear that had never been real? Could I forgive myself for all the birthdays I missed, all the first days of school, all the moments that I could never get back? The answer, I realized, was not a simple yes or no. It was something more complicated than that. I could forgive myself for being human, for being afraid, for making a terrible choice when I was young and broken and didn't know any better. But I couldn't forget, and I didn't want to forget. The pain of my own abandonment, the pain I had caused, the wasted years, those things needed to stay with me. They needed to remind me of what happens when we run from our responsibilities, when we let fear guide our choices, when we abandon the people who need us most. But I could also celebrate what had happened since I came back. I could celebrate Sophia's graduation from high school with honors. I could celebrate her starting a job at a local animal shelter, a job she had wanted for years. I could celebrate the life she was building, the friends she was making, the love she was receiving from a community that saw her for who she really was. And I could be part of that celebration, not as someone trying to make up for the past, but as someone who was present in her life right now. Carmen and I never got back together romantically. That ship had sailed a long time ago, and besides, it wasn't what either of us needed. But we became friends, real friends, the kind of friends who had been through something profound together and had come out the other side. We would have dinner sometimes, the three of us, and we would laugh about things and tell stories, and I would watch Carmen and Sophia interact and feel this overwhelming sense of gratitude for the strength they had shown, for the grace they had extended to me, for the second chance they had given me when I had done nothing to deserve it. By 2015, I was 58 years old. I had been back in Sophia's life for 5 years, and in many ways I felt like I was living a second life, a life I had been given as a gift. I had started working with other fathers who had abandoned their children, trying to help them understand that it's never too late to come back, that redemption is possible even after decades of running away. I had found meaning in my suffering, purpose in my pain. I'd become the kind of father that Sophia needed, not because I was perfect, but because I was present. One day, Sophia asked me if I had regrets. I said, "Of course I have regrets. I regret every single day that I wasn't there. I regret the fear that kept me away. I regret the waste of it all. But I also know that the only way to honor those regrets is to not waste another moment. The time I get with you now, the time I get to be your father, that's the only currency that matters. That's what I'm spending my life on." Sophia smiled and she said, "Good, because I need you to take me to the doctor tomorrow. My mom has a work thing, and I don't want to go alone." I said, "Of course, I'll be there." And I was, sitting in that waiting room, holding her hand when she was nervous, celebrating with her when the doctor said everything looked good. It was such a small thing, such an ordinary thing, but for me it was everything. It was the redemption I had been searching for, not as some grand gesture, but as the simple act of showing up for my daughter, day after day, moment after moment. As I sit here now, at 72 years old, reflecting on this journey, I want to say something to anyone who is listening to this and thinking about their own story of abandonment, of running away, of fear that's kept them from the people they love. It's never too late. That's what I learned. It's never too late to come back. It's never too late to say you're sorry. It's never too late to try to be the person that your children, your family, your community needs you to be. The pain of my abandonment, the years I wasted, the relationships I destroyed with my fear, those things will always be part of my story. But they don't define my story anymore. What defines my story now is what I did after I came back. What defines my story is the relationship I've built with my daughter, the friendship I've rebuilt with her mother, the community I've become part of, the lives I've tried to touch by sharing my story. Sophia is 26 now. She's talking about moving into her own apartment next year with a roommate. She's thinking about taking classes in early childhood education. She's dating a wonderful young man who treats her with respect and kindness. And I get to be part of all of it. I get to watch her grow and change and become more and more herself. I get to be her father not because I birthed her, but because I chose to show up for her every single day with all the love and commitment that I should have shown from the beginning. Last month, Sophia asked me to help her pick out furniture for her new place. We spent an entire Saturday going through stores, looking at beds and dressers and kitchen tables. And I realized something as we were walking through those aisles together, laughing about her terrible taste in decorations, arguing about what color her walls should be. I realized that this is what I had missed. Not the big moments, though those matter too, but these small, ordinary moments that make up a life, the moments where you're just being together, doing normal things, creating memories that don't need to be special because the fact that you're together makes them special enough. Her boyfriend, Marcus, came with us to pick out a couch. He's a good man, works in construction like I used to, and the way he looks at Sophia, the way he listens when she talks, the way he never makes her feel like she's anything less than exactly what she is, it fills me with a gratitude so deep I can barely express it. I remember thinking, this is what I wanted for her all along. Not pity, not charity, not someone willing to tolerate her disability, but someone who sees her, really sees her, and loves what he sees. Marcus asked me for advice about how to support Sophia in her dreams, and I told him something I had to learn the hard way. I said, just show up. Every single day, just show up for her. That's all that matters. Carmen and I went out to lunch a few weeks ago, just the two of us, and she told me something that made me cry. She said that watching me become a real father to Sophia, watching me show up and do the work, and genuinely be interested in her life, it had healed something in her that had been broken for a very long time. She said that she had spent so many years wondering if she had made the right choice in raising Sophia alone, if maybe Sophia would have been better off being adopted by a two-parent family, if maybe her disability combined with her broken family structure was too much for any child to bear. But seeing Sophia thrive, seeing her become this confident, capable, loving young woman, and seeing me finally step into my role as her father, it had answered all those questions. It had shown Carmen that what matters isn't the structure of the family. What matters is the love inside it. I think about my own father sometimes, the man who left when I was a child, the man whose abandonment set off a chain reaction that led me to abandon my own daughter. And I feel this strange mixture of sadness and understanding. He was broken too, probably scared too, probably running from his own demons the way I was running from mine. But that doesn't excuse it. That doesn't excuse what he did to me, and it doesn't excuse what I did to Sophia. The only thing that matters is that the cycle stops. The only thing that matters is that I chose to turn around and face what I had done, and I chose to do better. To Sophia, if you're watching this, I want to say thank you. Thank you for giving me the chance to know you. Thank you for your forgiveness, even when I didn't deserve it. Thank you for being the light that guided me home when I had been lost in the darkness for so long. You are braver than I have ever been, kinder than I deserve, and more forgiving than I could have ever asked. Your life is proof that Down syndrome doesn't limit what a person can be. Your life is proof that love is stronger than fear, that grace is more powerful than judgment, and that it's never too late for someone to come home. And to Carmen, thank you for raising our daughter with such incredible strength and grace. Thank you for being the mother that Sophia needed when I couldn't be the father she deserved. You carried this weight alone for so many years, and you never complained. Never made Sophia feel like a burden. Never let your own pain overshadow your love for her. You are the strongest person I know, and I will spend the rest of my life being grateful for what you did, and being sorry for the burden you had to carry alone. And to everyone who is struggling with their own regrets, their own abandonment, their own fears, I want to say this: don't wait. Don't wait 25 years like I did. Don't waste your life running from your pain. Turn around, face it, and then do the work to become the person that your family needs you to be. Because redemption is real. I'm living proof of it, and it's never too late to begin. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. If you have a story about family reunion, about forgiveness, about coming back after abandonment, I want to hear it. Comment below and tell me your story. Let's build a community of people who believe in second chances. If this story moved you, if you felt something shift inside you when you heard about Robert and Sophia's journey, then subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. We have more stories like this coming, stories about real people facing real struggles, stories about redemption and healing and the power of love. But we need your support. Share this video, comment, and let us know where you're watching from. We'll see you in the next one. Thank you for being here.